I'd like to start the commission meeting, if you don't mind. Not much of a gavel guy, so forgive me not pounding. This is the Port Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 6, 2024 for the Port of Bellingham. Welcome, everybody. Just like to start out with a roll call. Commissioner Shepard.
Here.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Here.
Commissioner Bell is here, all present and accounted for. I want to start off with a couple of things. First and foremost, we're going to close our executive session where we discussed matters pertaining to real estate and open the public meeting. And as part of opening the public meeting, we are open for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak before the commission, we will have two opportunities, one now and one at the end of the session. If you do wish to speak before the commission, we just ask that you keep it respectful and that anyone in the audience refrain from commenting because we like to hear people's opinions unfiltered and unpressured. So feel free to speak before this commission. And I've got two people signed up. If you are online and wish to speak, just raise your hand and we will recognize you. Anybody in the audience that did not sign up, we'll call for you at some point. But let's start with Paul Smith. Paula Smith.
Hello.
Welcome.
Nice to see what a nice room this is that you're meeting in. I have a picture, you know. Yeah, so I'm from Blaine, and I'm from Hive Mike, and I'm from a family that has been there since the late 1800s. And at that point, they had hardware and grocery and livery and home goods and things like that. Right in the very middle of Blaine, not on the water side, the other side. And so I lived in Blaine from high school on and have ever since. And, you know, it's a beloved community. It really is. And people move there and they really like it. So anyway, the thing is about the end of the dock is that's what we say, the end of the dock. But it's Jim Jorgensen's pier. And you all know Jim, knew Jim, and Chris, his son, lives right next to us. And we don't actually talk to him about the dock thing. But the main concern I have or question is, and you know, I know you guys are dealing with the whole port and you have a plan for it all. And that my concern at this moment is the end part. And I know that people in Blaine really care about it. And I have a group online called It's Blaine, that's the name. And it's only beautiful pictures, and then something like that, there gets to be discussion. We don't do a whole lot of that, you know, political stuff, but that's a real home thing to talk about. And if people are respectful, we do it. So anyway, I stand probably with I would rather we could have cars go to the end. But I would also accept that safety and what you guys understand about all of that and what can be done is beyond what I know. So to me, it's a little hard to picture the space down there and people picnicking and everything to be able to bring the cars right on down there. But my brother, Jerry Wolton, he owned the hardware store that was called Coast to Coast. And he would go every lunchtime down there with his truck. And people from Blaine know that he did that. And he would eat his lunch and take a little nap, and then he'd be done. And so we have a lot of that kind of memory. And so I did hear one thing that made me wonder if anyone else wanted to open some kind of business down there. That doesn't sound appropriate. Like, like the oyster place or something. I don't know where exactly it is that they're doing well as a business, but I wouldn't think it would be there. That whole area is so special down there where people can fish and all that. So, well, I've had a lot of things I would say, but when I said 3 minutes, you know, I just had to throw it all out. Yeah, so it's, so of course, if we can't do cars, and if we do cars, that whole area that goes down there, you know, like somebody said, it's it's your hardy ones that ever get out of their car and walk down there these days. But that could, of course, be fixed up really lovely. And I don't, of course, understand much about what happened underneath and what the problem has been that meant we had to close it off there. But we understand that's all very important, that that be wonderful and safe. And we don't accept that some people drove off the end one time or jumped off the end as a reason that it can't be fixed in a way that that won't happen. So that's mainly what I want to say, is that you can hear already what I said. Thank you. Yes, yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, because, yes, and I did hear that it's half and half, or it's something. And you're saying really it's the road is our responsibility. And you can't do that.
Well, but the road can't be fixed till we do the bulkheads, so that's why it's shared responsibility. So the bulkheads are the port, but the road is the city, and then the pier is the port. So
Okay.
it's all tied together, but we're looking for funding for them to do the road. Whether
Okay, so would you just say that again for me?
the bulkheads, which hold the road up, are the port's responsibility, at least on the inside of the harbor. And then the pier is the port's responsibility, and the road is the city's responsibility. So we're looking to the city of Blaine for funding to repair the road.
Okay. And the end of the dock, do you call it?
Sure.
I don't ever, the pier, whatever. Well, that part, I think years ago it was a pretty low, like a railroad tie or something. But now, of course, it's a very nice part that protects. So thank you.
Right. Yeah. First of all, thank you. I want to say that everything the port's been doing over the past couple of years has been really cool. Cool to see the development and the improvements that have been made. So I'm coming on behalf of the Bellingham Eagles Club. I know that you've had a couple members kind of coming up and asking about it. And I don't know if this was the right time to talk. I was actually going to wait till after the meeting, but I figured since my name got called, here I am. I wanted to call and ask what the status of our proposal was and if you guys had reached a final conclusion on that.
So we did get a proposal from the Eagles. We haven't reached a final conclusion because there wasn't anything to conclude. We have a relationship with the seller of the property, which is the gentleman that owns CityMac. He, of course, is welcome to come to us with an assignment of lease to assign the lease over to the Eagles. I've advised him that probably wouldn't be approved. Now, that's not my decision to make.
That would be or would not be?
It would not be approved.
Would not be approved, okay.
And that's not my decision to make. It would have to be a Port Commission decision. But my staff and I have looked over the proposal by the Eagle Club, and we don't think it meets the intent of the commission for what they want to do with that property.
Okay.
That property historically has been a marine trades related property. We feel like we were kind of taken advantage of by CityMac by not having marine trades in there. He was supposed to sell marine electronics out of that building, and he never really did. So we're going to make sure the next user gets it back into the marine trades realm.
Okay. So out of curiosity on that, I know there's a lot of properties around the port that house businesses that are not directly marine related, restaurants, massage parlors, or massage places. Obviously restaurants, acupuncture, those type of things. And so I'm wondering, are those businesses given the same kind of questioning when it comes to wanting to lease those properties?
They're not, because there's different zoning in different areas of the waterfront here. And the port treats these different areas differently. Like the Bellwether Peninsula is gentrified, and we recognize it's gentrified, and it's going to have lawyers and financial advisors and such in there. But other areas of the port, we try to keep strictly marine trades. And that harbor especially is one of those.
Okay. And then really the last question I have is, did you already have some sort of business in mind that was planning on going into that spot?
Do not.
Okay.
And let me just go back and say that if you do an aerial view over that site, you'll see how appropriate it is for marine trades. You'll see how close we are to boats and the boating community.
Yep.
And you fly over the top of the Bellwether Hotel and you see it's a hotel and condos, right?
Yes.
It's completely different. It's apples and oranges. And right now, our real estate division is bursting at the seams with people who want access. So
Okay.
that's
Thank you.
our take. Thanks. Anyone online wishing to speak today before the commission? I don't see any hands. Anyone else in the audience that wish to say something before the Port Commission, before we start the meeting? To have Riley Sweeney shake his head no, that's a day for the calendar. All right, so now I'm going to go on to the advisory committee. I'm going to start out today by something we don't normally do. I'm going to say, mention that we do have a Business and Commerce Committee meeting that meets on Mondays. And the next meeting for the Business and Commerce Committee will be February 12th at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on a Zoom call. You can check our website to find that. But that's also open to the public. So I just wanted to add that to the mix today. And then we have our Marine Advisory Committee, our MAC meeting on February 13th at 6 p.m. It's in person only. It'll be in the administrative office right here in this Mount Baker room. And then we have our Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee on April 18th at 4 p.m. That's a Zoom meeting. It's also going to be in person at the ARF Station building. And again, that's April 18th at 4 p.m. That being said, that's all of the advisory committee meetings, and now we'll move to the regular session. The consent agenda. Carrie, if you don't mind.
Yeah, motion to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Commissioner Briscoe, do you have anything to add, subtract, discuss?
Nothing to add or subtract on that.
Commissioner Shepard? Nope. Commissioner Bell has none either.
All right, motion to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Commissioner Shepard? Yeah. Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is a yes. And now my favorite part of the year. We will have a fourth quarter financial update from our CFO, Tamara Sopcich.
Thanks. Tamara Sopcich, CFO. We actually have a special treat today. I brought Sarah Eastwood, our controller. She's going to help me do this presentation. So it's a three-part. The first part is just the few quarterly updates. Second part is the financial update for the entire year, and Sarah's going to do that. And then I'll end it with talking about our 2023 corporate goals and just a few things that we did towards working toward those goals. That's our annual. So we'll start with the stormwater program. All training and record keeping are in compliance with both permits. At the airport, the results were within permit limits. And then at the shipping terminal, we again had 8 exceedances: copper, zinc, turbidity, total suspended solids, and those required responses will be complete by the deadline. Last quarter, I reported that we triggered a level 3 corrective action, and those that work is already began in 2024. So we're responding appropriately to that.
Exceedances, how does that compare to our last quarter's reporting?
I believe last quarter was 11. I believe.
Going down a little.
So going
some
down, yeah.
improvement,
Yeah,
but Still need that new stormwater system that's being installed.
that's right. That's right. And I'm actually going to speak to that in a little bit. Public records request, we had 126 last year. Staff hours, it took over 400 hours to fulfill those requests, compared to a year ago, over 500 hours. So it's taking less and less time. I think those requests are getting just a little bit more simple.
So, but basically, per request, it takes about 4 hours of staff time.
You know, it's hard to say that because some of them are really large and they're taking hours and hours and hours,
Some are
and
simple.
some are just, here's a piece of paper. So I don't think an average is really a good indicator. And then finally, our safety reports. We had 3 injuries over the entire year last year. Better than the prior year, which was 6, but not as good as our target, which is 0. So that's it for our quarterly updates. I will let Sarah introduce herself and present the financials.
The exciting stuff. Hi, everyone. Sarah Eastwood, Controller. And as Tamara mentioned, I'm going to be going over the financial results for all of 2023. The purpose of this presentation is really just to note the variances from 2023 actuals and the 2023 approved budget. And then also to note the variances, any big differences from 2023 actuals and 2022 actuals. So I know there's kind of a lot going on this slide. I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're talking about here. The next few slides are going to look very similar to this. So on the left here, we have the group of revenues. So revenues are port money received coming in. And then next we have expenses. So that's any port paid money going out. And then we have our net. So in this case, we have net income this year, which, spoiler alert, we did well this year, so that's good. I'm not going to show the net on every division tab. It's just going to be on this tab for now. And then if we look back at the revenue cluster there, on the far left is going to be our 2023 actuals. The middle is going to be our 2023 budget. And then on the right is going to be our 2022 actuals. So now that we've been able to digest what's going on here, I can get into it. So like I said, this is going to be kind of an easy presentation because we have good news. So our revenues all came in higher than planned this year, and our expenses came in lower than planned. So both of those are what we want. And then in addition, our revenues were 1.5 million higher than prior year, so that is great. And then for our expenses, so one of the purposes of this presentation, like I said, is to look at 2023 actual to 2022 actual. So our expenses, yes, they came in under budget, but you can see a significant increase in those expenses. And truly, that's just costs across the board have increased. So that's going to be our utility costs, costs in materials, outside services, consulting fees, all of that. So when I get into the division tabs, each of those, I'm going to explain any specifics that are glaring in those divisions. But mostly, if it's just costs related to that across the board increases, I'm not really going to touch on. So.
Just a couple of quick, is the expense from 2022, is that basically COVID hangover? Where we didn't have as many expenses in 2022?
Is it, sorry, the expenses in 2022, is it what?
They're so much lower and the net was so much greater. Was that basically because we had fewer expenses due to some kind of COVID hangover that persisted, or?
I'm not sure that it was just due to COVID hangover. I can't really speak to that. I just think that costs, so, yeah.
Yeah. I think a little bit. We did have higher staff. We hired more staff in 2023, so that's a big one. And then also there were some projects that were delayed. So a little, probably a combination of higher costs and more staff, less staff, projects not being done as much.
And don't worry, I'll get into that in the divisions. Okay. So now starting off with aviation. As you can see, the revenues for 2023 were significantly higher than we planned, so that's great, and very similar to the prior year. So if I look at the aviation's P&L individually, almost every single line item was higher than planned, so that was great. But there were a couple that really stood out. So one of those was the concession fees revenues, and the other is our parking fees revenues. So those both did significantly increase, higher than planned in 2023. And then expenses, there's really nothing to note there. They came in under budget, and they are a bit higher than the prior year, but that is truly just no individual line items, just costs increasing across the board.
And why did we budget so low for revenues in 2023?
Yes. Oh, you.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say we budgeted very conservatively, but you probably have more details.
We knew that the Horizon flights were going to decrease in frequency quite a bit, and we knew that we knew the revenue wasn't going to be there because of the plane and the pilot shortage.
And the increase that we actually saw was because Southwest added some.
We got
and then-
Southwest, and then it is mostly Southwest, I believe, but also the Allegiant flights I think came back faster than we thought. And Kip's here if he wants to say anything. But
then for
if we're doing okay, then you don't have to say anything. We're doing okay.
And then for 2024, we're going to see an increase in Alaska.
Alaska is starting mid-March. In fact, I just booked, I think, the first flight on March 15th, coming home at 5-something p.m. from Seattle. So I'm on that flight. So yeah, you're seeing an increase in frequency on the Alaska Horizon. You're seeing an increase in frequency to Denver on a Southwest, and I think they're adding an Oakland run even next year. Is that correct? A second Sunday Oakland?
Well, they're changing a couple of flights, but yeah, the Oakland and the Vegas, they're moving around a little bit. Those will probably be a wash.
Okay. But definitely an increase in Denver. So yeah, right now what we see is an increase in flight frequency for 2024.
Any other questions on aviation? Moving on to the marinas. So for the marinas, revenues did come in slightly higher than planned and about $600,000 higher than the prior year. So revenues at the marinas are pretty easy to guesstimate, right? We have very high occupancy rates. And so looking into it, I wanted to note that at the Blaine Marina, we saw a significant increase in recreational moorage. So that was exciting. Wanted to note that. And for expenses, again, nothing really to note, no individual line items at the marinas specifically besides utilities. You know, utility costs have increased and the marina uses a lot of utilities. But other than that, it did come in under budget, so that was all planned. Moving on to the cruise terminal. So the cruise terminal revenues came in higher than planned and higher than the prior year. Again, the cruise terminal is pretty similar to the marinas where it's easy to guess what the revenues are going to be. So a bit of this increase at the cruise terminal is mostly due to the fact that the Alaska Marine Highway System ferries had some layovers. So what that means is we build extra to man the lines, but that's going to increase our revenues, and you'll also see an increase in our expenses because we have to offset this for the longshore labor. So the net effect is very minimal, but that's why you'll see the expenses are a bit over budget. That was unplanned. However, we did make up for it with some revenues.
Can you just run through, and I just want to see the top line numbers, go to the airport, go to the marinas, and go to the cruise terminal?
Sure.
So we do about 7 million aviation, 10 million marinas, and 2 million cruise terminal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the trend I'm seeing here is the expenses are increasing from 2022 in every category.
They are, and this one specifically, I'm glad you bring that up because I wanted to talk about, this is a significant increase from 2022. So yes, that's due to cost increases and the Alaska Marine Highway System's ferry layovers. But in addition to that, we in 2023 purchased $870,000 worth of advanced mitigation credits. And we did that through Puget Sound Partnership for the BCT piling repairs project. So this was approved, this was planned, and this will not be an ongoing occurrence, so this will not be happening in 2024.
So in 2024, you expect us to be back in the 2022 range?
Yes.
That one-time occurrence?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be capitalized?
Yeah, so it was a capital project. However, accounting rules, we have to expense advanced mitigation credits because that wasn't a requirement for the project. So that's kind of how I keep my job, so don't tell people.
I won't tell anyone, but it wasn't a requirement for the project, but we couldn't do the project without it.
Right.
Got it.
Accounting-wise, it wasn't a requirement for the project.
And unfortunately, you can't see this, but Mother Hen is behind you, and the expressions on her face with each of these questions. It's not that it's a distraction or anything, Tamara. It's just.
Was that right?
I'm just watching your face as we. She's like a mother hen.
Okay, good. She's helping me. This
She's
is my first
protecting
time.
Question, do we see any, do we have any forecasts of changes to the cruise terminal? Anything with the Alaska Marine Highway System that we see as increasing or decreasing? I know it's sometimes something we've had to go to bat and fight for to maintain here. Any indications of what to expect?
Can I answer that question in 2 weeks? Joe is up there now meeting with the state of Alaska on this. We think everything's going to be status quo, but we won't know until he comes back and gives us a good report. But he's there this week and he's working the angles for us.
They're filling that ship when it goes north, right?
It's not full. No, it's not full to the capacity it used to be. It's not nearly the activity. So, and it's always that threat of having budget cuts, and the governor doesn't like the system in the first place. So there's always a bit of a risk there. But from what I'm hearing is that next year's schedule is going to be, is Dave here? If I say anything wrong, Dave, please come up to the microphone. But what I'm hearing, it's going to be pretty status quo as to what we've had the last couple of years.
Is the decrease in tourism or is the decrease in business?
I believe it's
travel?
tourism.
Tourism?
Yeah.
They don't market tourism on that ferry. Or not?
And not only that, apparently the governor of Alaska thinks everybody can walk on water like him. Pretty tough to get around to those islands without a ferry.
That's a good one.
Okay, so moving on to the shipping terminal. Shipping terminal revenues came in lower than planned, so we budgeted optimistically during the 2023 budget process. However, I do want to point out that our revenues did increase by $300,000 from the prior year, so we are still seeing progress. As for the expenses, nothing really to note. So expenses came in under budget, a little bit higher than the prior year. Again, that was just related to increased costs across the board. So nothing, no individual line items to note.
For 2024, we will see significant increases, though, in the budget expenses
And revenues.
and revenue, right?
But will all the construction costs for the strengthening project be shown
No,
here?
no, because those will be capitalized. So these are just operating expenses. Yeah.
Okay, so for real estate revenues are normally spot on, so they're very easy to predict. Again, we have high levels of occupancy. So this increase or higher amount of revenues than planned is due mainly to the purchase and leasing of the Marine Drive Industrial Park. As for expenses, they came in right at budget, and again, nothing really to note for that. They are a little bit higher than the prior year because of just increased costs, but nothing glaring to speak to on that.
Except again, I note the expenses from 2022 are significantly lower. So again, the trend continues.
Yes, you'll see that throughout all of the
At
departments.
some point, let's talk about what the root cause of that is because it's higher than inflation.
It is higher than inflation. We hired a number of individuals. I think the commission's aware of that. They direct us on a lot of these matters to go hire more people, more to get stuff done. So our real estate department's larger than it's ever been. Our marinas, we brought security in-house. We have more engineers. We have more outside consultants just trying to speed up some of these projects at the commission's direction.
But it's something to note because we are spending a lot of money, much more than we were in 2022.
Moving on to overhead. So overhead is comprised of 4 different departments. They are executive, administration, planning, and facilities. And those revenues are minimal inherently on the overhead departments. So we can just focus on the expenses. So expenses are pretty much right at budget and higher than the prior year. Again, nothing individual to note there. Again, probably more people were hired for each of those departments, but no individual line items to speak to for the increase. Waterfront. So revenues were not as high as planned for 2023, but they are very similar to the prior year. And for the expenses, they did come in under budget. Again, we had planned for some significantly higher expenses than the prior year. So this one does have some individual line items to speak to. So there were some unforeseen legal costs and increase in utilities and increase in supplies purchased for the container village.
With the additional containers for 2024, do we expect to see a net positive on that? Because we have net positive in 2022.
Yeah, we probably will. There's some other factors in here that have nothing to do with the portal, and that's mostly speaking to the legal costs related to Harcourt. But the extra containers will bring in additional revenue with very little additional expense associated with them.
So the legal expense for Harcourt's in this as well.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to all other public, so this includes 4 divisions as well. So this one includes economic development, community connections, infrastructure, and environmental. Also not very high revenue generating locations, except for the fact that I wanted to point out this year we generated almost 100,000 more in revenues than planned, and that is due to our events department. So that means that we rented out more facilities than planned. As for our expenses, these ones did come in significantly under budget, which is good news. And they are still higher than the prior year. So again, this is comprised of 4 different divisions. So I didn't know anything individual to pinpoint on this, really, that stands out.
Not to beat a dead horse, but expenses again are significantly higher.
Yes.
Didn't want it to go unsaid.
Okay, so stepping away from the profit and loss statements, we're going to move on to our balance sheet here. So what a balance sheet is it's your assets and your liabilities at a point in time. So we are going to be comparing December 31st, 2023 to December 31st, 2022. Now, the most important part of this pie is going to be our net assets. So you can tell that we have a very strong balance sheet because our net assets are sitting at $295 million. So that is an increase in approximately $20 million from the prior year. So what that means is we are adding more assets to our portfolio and we're paying down our debt. So this is really good news for us this year.
And this is a much better picture than, in my opinion, than looking at expense increases year over year. We've got a 6% increase here in net assets in very inflationary times.
I just did the math in my head. I mean, we far exceeded in net assets what we're doing in increasing expenses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that means
there's good news.
we're getting a lot of return for our investments here. And that's a lot of staff.
And solid investments.
And a few grants here and there help as well.
Well, that takes a lot of staff work. I mean, those grants do not come without a ton of investment in time and effort and skilled people to be able to track those down and make them happen. So, I mean, this shows we're spending resources, but we're having a good return on them, and it continues to improve. It's a good sign.
And the decrease in liabilities is a good sign as well. When you look at the net decrease in liabilities on that same side, increasing assets, decreasing liabilities is a huge measure.
And we have consciously been trying to pay down debt for the last 10 years since we issued the bonds for the airport. We are going to hit a cycle where we have to reissue some debt. So I just want to point that out.
No.
And the last thing that I'm going to report on are our investments. So we currently have $15 million in federal securities with an average yield of 2.3%. And the remainder of our cash sits in our LGIP account.
Average yield of 2.3%?
2.3, yes. And the remainder of our cash sits in our LGIP account of $56.8 million, and that is earning at a rate of 5.43%, and that is as of 12/31/2023. And I also wanted to report that as of 1/31/2024, that percent is 5.42, so it is still holding. And that's all. Any more questions?
Commissioner Briscoe.
No, I have none. There's been a lot of talk already. It's very, very well done. And you're okay, Ken. It's all right.
I needed validation. Thank you. Commissioner Shepard?
No, since you've already talked too much, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I'm handing it back over to Tamara.
Nice job, Sarah.
Sarah, great job.
Do you want to do this part too?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I don't have any other.
She's going to stand behind you and nod approvingly.
Nod and be my cheerleader.
I did have some questions until I was shamed into not.
That works too. All right, so we'll go through the key corporate goals in no particular order. I did only choose a couple of highlights for each, otherwise we were going to be here all night with all the stuff that we do. Starting out, again, no particular order, plan necessary environmental cleanup is one of our strategic goals for '23. The I&J waterway is a huge milestone for us. Design and permitting is complete and it's currently out to bid. And we're expecting construction to start in the 2024 fish window, which I believe is August. It has taken us over a decade to get to this point, so I just really want to pause on that for a second. The other environmental cleanup I want to mention is the central waterfront. We completed the bioremediation system installation to treat petroleum contamination down there at that site. And this picture is a little misleading unless you look to the far, far end of that trench and there's a person standing there and you can really see the magnitude of the size of that project. And then we're also doing ongoing design and permitting at other priority MOTCA sites such as Harris Avenue Shipyard, Cornwall Avenue Landfill, Whatcom Waterway, Westman Marine, and CK Fish. Another one of our goals is the expansion of marine trades. Last year, we had our second annual Marine Trades Job Fair at the Fisherman's Pavilion. There were 25 businesses and about 300 candidates attended. This was in partnership with the BTC, Lummi Nation, Nooksack Indian Tribe, and Working Waterfront Coalition. And planning for the third annual job fair is underway.
Do we have a date for that?
It's May 9th, Fisherman Pavilion from 10 to 1.
Perfect.
And that's impressive, so good job on that, Carrie.
Well, we already have more businesses signed up than we did last year, so,
All marine trades, 100% marine trades.
yep.
We purchased and leased the Marine Drive Industrial Park, as Sarah mentioned. The majority of those industrial buildings are leased. The majority of those tenants are marine trades related. And there are about 40 employees total on that site. And then finally, we completed the preliminary concept layouts for the marine trades in the ASB area, initiated stakeholder outreach, and we plan to initiate sub-area plan amendment with the city this year. Another goal is the strategic management of the airport. You already talked about this earlier, kind of stole this thunder, but recent airline announcements, Alaska's expanding service to Seattle, 3 daily flights beginning in March. And Southwest is expanding service to Denver, so 3 weekly departures, 2 Saturday and 1 Sunday beginning in April.
Are they talking at all, Kip, about moving to a weekday? Southwest?
Yeah, Kip Turner, Director of Aviation. We are talking with him about trying to do daily. This will be a good segment into that. If we have the same load factors with this, which I think we will, which are running in the 90+ percentile, it'll be an easy discussion for us. So they plan about 4 to 6 months out. So any opportunity we would have for them to swap to daily would probably be the earliest fall or even next spring would probably make more sense if this is successful with these.
Yeah, just anything in the middle of the week. I go to Denver a lot, and I'm going this week. And just coming home, you got to wait for the weekend.
Yeah.
Right, so when you go, you can't do just an in and out. You've got to go and stay and
Yeah, unless you route through Vegas or
somewhere else. Yeah, and then you're on
As far as
plane for an
direct
8
route.
hours. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, we all see the need, and I think they're realizing the benefit of it as well. So we envision this to be very successful, and this is usually how they piecemeal a market together. So this is pretty, the fact that we're getting the extra 2 flights is a wonderful sign that they're liking the service, they're liking the market, they're liking the route. So as long as we fill those up and do well on those, I envision that by this time next year, we'll have a lot better discussion going for daily.
It is a pretty thing to see in the sky when the plane comes in.
Yep.
Hey, Kip, are any of our airline partners experiencing challenges with the MAX?
They all, everybody in the industry had to park their MAXs to have that done. The good thing is the FAA finally got through the gray period, if you will, on what the inspections were to look like, and the airlines that had to park them that are now able to put them back into service. Alaska, for example, has already put a lot of theirs, if not all of theirs, back in service. So I'm actually going to meet with Alaska Thursday, talking about a new route with them. So it's a very positive opportunity because the MAXs are back to have some positive energy on those discussions.
So a couple more items to note at the airport. The construction of the snow removal equipment building is nearly complete. It was funded 90% by the FAA. It was a very large project, and that picture down below doesn't really show justice, but the picture on the right, that's the snow removal equipment, and it's parked in that building, and you can see people standing next to it, again, showing the magnitude of that piece of equipment.
Just out of curiosity, on the budget for airport expenses, do we factor in every year an event like we had this year where typically we know that we've got problems at the airport with plumbing, and are we factoring that in on an annual basis?
Maybe not the plumbing, but certainly the de-icing stuff that we buy and the snow, everything we do there. We factor in a couple of winter events every year. We don't expect us to have the sprinkler heads break every single year. So
We've had it happen a couple of times. So just,
3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So we're getting our arms around how to stop that. I'd rather prevent it than try and fix it after the fact, obviously.
yeah,
But yeah, no, to answer your question, we do budget for extreme weather events.
it didn't escape me that we had 3 years of issues, yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I want to mention at the airport is the Alpha Air Park. While this is not a port project necessarily, our new taxi lane that we put in 2022 provided direct access to the new corporate and GA hangars. There's a high demand for hangar space, which can now accommodate aircraft up to a BBJ MAX, Gulfstream G700, and Global 8000. This investment also created construction jobs and provides a new asset to support the long-term growth of the business community in Whatcom County.
Just in the future, does that look like an opportunity for us to maybe build more hangars to capitalize on that demand?
Yeah, we think so.
I would think so.
The next strategic goal I want to mention is the redevelopment of the BST and log ponds. And honestly, this slide could have been 5 slides. There's so much going on down there. But one of the main things I wanted to point out was the 2020 MERIT grant was finalized. It took several years to get that signed and finalized. That picture is actually from last week. I think it was either day 1 or day 2 of the dredge. So the dredging is currently underway to increase the depth to support cargo vessel access. And then the pier repairs should be complete by the end of 2025, and that's just rebuilding the central pier to support the cargo crane and heavier cargoes across that pier. And meanwhile, incorporating that state-of-the-art stormwater treatment system down there. Another thing we're doing down there is the power upgrades to the pier and warehouses and high-speed internet. It's about 60% complete. That project consists of raising power poles at the entry gate, routing utilities underground, installing 2 new LED light poles, one of which you can see in that center picture, and then providing Wi-Fi for Warehouse 2 and for any vessels that come. The next one is stimulate economic development and job creation. And really, a lot of the other projects that I've mentioned could fit on this slide. But 2 that I'm going to mention in addition are Bearden at FMIP. There's about 45 full-time employees in high-wage shipbuilding jobs, and over $6 million provided to small businesses in Whatcom County who produce materials and deliver services to that company. And then Northline, we're all familiar with this one. There's about 100 employees and contractors for the construction of the Hannah. And they're in the process of hiring over 60 year-round workers locally based. So the picture on the left is where it stands now, and the picture on the right is the rendering of what it's going to look like when complete. Another goal we had was employee retention. Employees are our most important resource. Our second annual employee engagement survey was completed last year. We're actually in the 3rd one right now. We launched that one. The highest rated comment was, "I enjoy the people I work with." I think that was 2 years in a row that was our highest comment, highest scoring comment. And we also identified opportunities for management. So address performance issues, keep employees informed of what's going on, and then managing a diverse workforce. And so we are actively working on improving those areas as well. And then employee committee fun events, chili cook-off, director's breakfast, adopt a family, those are all really well received. And I know the employee committee has already planned the events for 2024, and there's some fun ones coming. And then the last goal is the ongoing development of the waterfront. The first affordable housing project in the waterfront was Mercy Housing Northwest. They're currently accepting applications and move-in expected in April. And then they're in the design and permitting phase for Millworks Phase 2. And then the board mill group is also in the design and permitting phase for the board mill project, so that's moving along as well. And then, of course, we have to mention the Waterfront Container Village. Last year, there were 6 container businesses, 1 rotating artist container, 1 food truck all season, plus 4 rotating food trucks, along with many events like the Bellingham Makers Market, April Brews Day, which supported the Max Higby Center, et cetera. And then I just want to end with something fun. Okay, so are there any questions, comments?
Commissioner Briscoe?
Well done.
Mr. Shepherd?
If you have a utility meter like this on the
we're
side
on-
of your
now we're on
house,
YouTube
you
here.
could get paid to go solar for no money out of pocket.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, well, thanks for all that, lots of good news there.
Yeah.
Lots of exciting work happening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there going to be a Toby Keith video or something after that commercial? It was on YouTube. Oh. Oh, I'm heartbroken. All right. Thank you for that. Well done. Action items. Carry number 1, if you don't mind.
All right, motion to approve the cooperative agreement as presented to the commission and authorize executive director to execute the agreement.
Brian or Holly?
I really don't want to follow that video with the granular nature of what I have before you.
No one's going to exclaim, yeah, when you're done, just so you know.
Brian might. I don't know. Commissioners, Holly Stafford, Port's General Counsel with CSD Attorneys at Law. I apologize for my voice. I'm overcoming some respiratory stuff. I think we probably all are. We're here today to request approval of a cooperative agreement with a company named 1000C LLC. This is one of the last paperwork hurdles that we need to go through for the Whatcom Waterway remediation, the next phase. The historical background on this one is important because this cooperative agreement is essentially identical to a previous cooperative agreement that the port entered into in 2007 with Meridian Pacific Highway LLC. So the port has been conducting active cleanup out here since about 2007. The Washington State Department of Ecology entered into a consent decree for the Whatcom Waterway with a number of defendants, including at that time the port and Meridian Pacific. There's a figure that's pulled up here, it's very ancient. Brian was very worried that I was going to pull this up because I don't know if you can see my mouse, but where it says city, that's actually port owned now. The point of this figure is to show the area that was formerly owned by Meridian Pacific. This is pulled from the original consent decree, so this is a 2007 era figure. So the original cooperative agreement between the port and Meridian Pacific had to do with what we call the Meridian Pacific shoreline, which, if I can find my mouse again, is this dark black area right here. The purpose of that agreement was to require Meridian Pacific to cooperate with the port's cleanup, with the port being the lead for the Whatcom Waterway remediation. And you can imagine in the intervening 17 years that there have been some changes down there, including Meridian Pacific transferring ownership of this property to another entity, which then transferred to another entity, and so forth. So really what we're talking about now is just this little area here. You can, I don't know if you can see these two vertical dashed green lines. So it's really this little box is all that's owned by 1000C LLC. This property here to the right is owned by a different entity. We don't have concerns about needing a cooperative agreement with that entity because they're not going to be a party on the consent decree. So where we are right now with the paperwork is we're on the verge of having the second amendment to the consent decree entered into Whatcom County Superior Court. The second amendment has already been published by Ecology for public review back in March, excuse me, of 2023. And what it does is it establishes the dioxin-furans cleanup standards. It adjusts the cleanup schedule a wee bit, and it revises the plan for the ASB confined disposal facility. So you can see they're very important steps that the port is moving towards. In July of 2023, after that consent decree was put out for public review, the attorney for 1000C LLC reached out to all of the other parties on the consent decree, which would be Ecology, the city, the Department of Natural Resources, and the port, saying, wait a minute, hold on, the 1000C LLC is a successor to Meridian Pacific and therefore should be on what we call the caption to the consent decree. So the consent decree is a pleading like we'd file in the court. It's got plaintiff and defendant. And currently it has Meridian Pacific as a defendant, but it does not list 1000C LLC. The reason that's important to the parties is under statute, if one owns contaminated property, they're jointly and severally liable for the cleanup costs. And if you're a party to a consent decree, you get what's called contribution protection. So that means that no third party can pursue you for contributing to the cleanup costs. And so 1000C wants the benefit of that, the consent decree, but what the port's concern is there's no obligation for that entity to cooperate with the port with any cleanup that might occur in the Meridian Pacific shoreline. So rather than have a fight in court that involves DNR, Ecology, the city, and 1000C LLC, and or perhaps Meridian Pacific, we've come up with this cooperative agreement, which again is virtually the same as what we had with Meridian Pacific. It requires 1000C to cooperate with the consent decree activities, and in exchange, the port will provide the same benefits as it was to Meridian Pacific in that it will be reasonably consistent with 1000C's planned future uses for the property. So with the Commission's approval of this cooperative agreement, then I can sign a stipulation that would essentially swap Meridian Pacific out and swap 1000C LLC in for into the caption. They can be happy. The consent decree can be finalized and filed with the court. It's already been approved by the Commission, and away we go. So, any questions? No woohoos about the. Woohoo! I know. See, this is why you will never see Law and Order Civil Procedure. No one will watch it.
Wait till you get a vote, then we'll have a woohoo.
Okay, perfect.
What's the nature of 1000C LLC's current operations on that property?
Brian might know a little bit more than I do about what they're doing out there. I don't know that it's much different than what has ever been done. The 1000C LLC and Meridian Pacific have the same principals that own those companies, so I don't think the operations are much different.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental Planning. Yeah, it's right now, I think they're just kind of in the redevelopment mode. There's a lot of storage. They're looking at potentially putting some floats out in front of there. They have to go through permitting process with that. I think they're trying to market it as a potential waterfront property. But right now, I don't know of any specific uses other than it's kind of storage area for now. It's a pretty small slice. It's pretty that Meridian Pacific shape, like Holly said, has shrunk down quite a bit. And so what's left is really just a kind of like a parcel and then a little pipe stem out to the C Street for access.
Who are the principals local?
Ebenall, David Ebenall Company. Yeah.
I think we'll go to vote on this.
Thank you.
Correct? I have no more questions. Commissioner Briscoe, did you have anything?
No, I have none.
Kier?
Holly, is the staff recommendation that to approve this?
Yes.
So motion to approve the cooperative agreement as presented to the commission and authorize the executive director to execute the agreement.
Mr. Shepard?
Yes.
Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is also a yes.
Woohoo!
And I'm thinking if you could cast McConaughey and Sandra Bullock, you could probably get that Law and Order Civil Procedure show off the ground. Just need the right cast. You're not buying it.
Are you offering?
To be the producer? Yeah. All right, item number 2.
Authorize the executive director to execute a personal service agreement with CFM Advocates to provide federal lobbying consulting services.
And I apologize to the commission on this one. This is just something that I pulled off personally because I needed a little bit of explanation as to why we needed a federal lobbyist and we haven't had one in the past. And I just thought it deserved a little bit more discussion about what their job would be and what we plan to accomplish and what the return on investment would be for something like this.
You bet. Appreciate the conversation, Commissioner. Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Just by way of background, our federal delegation right now is in very good position. We have Representative Rick Larson, who's ranking member on Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Senator Patty Murray, who's chair of APROPS. She's also Senate President Pro Temp, which means she's third in line for the president, which most people would say is her most important position, except for Executive Director Fix, who says because she's a Coug, that's the most important part about her. We also have Senator Maria Cantwell, who's chair of Commerce, Science, and Transportation. So a very well-positioned federal delegation. You can see in the picture to the side, Executive Director Fix and myself with Representative Larson and announcing a $1.3 million grant for the airport to reconfigure the runway. Federal grants are really important for all we do at the port. Since 2021, we've had over $20 million that's come into the international airport, over $7 million to our shipping terminal. Also played a really important role recovering from the pandemic as far as passing through small business grants. Just a couple projects we have now where you see some of those federal grants in work. Our shipping terminal modernization project, a $6.85 million PIDP or Port Infrastructure Development Program grant. We also have just recently received a $1.02 million grant for a portable barge ramp through the Marine Highways Program. The snow removal equipment building was funded by federal grants, $3 million FAA grants. As Tamara mentioned before, the taxi lane connection was a $5.3 million FAA grant the port got. Importantly, that stimulates a large amount of private investment. So again, the federal grants are really important for all we do. One of the reasons we think it's a good time for a federal consultant is there's a lot of infrastructure funding at the federal level right now through the bipartisan infrastructure law, $1.2 trillion for transportation and infrastructure projects for a 5-year period for 2022 to 2026. Some of those grant programs, Port Infrastructure and Development grants, the RAISE grants are Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, the Airport Terminals Program. Those are just a few. There's a lot of different grant programs that this money trickles down through. There was also the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which is the single largest investment in clean energy and climate. It's a 10-year program, so a lot of grant opportunities through that program as well. Federal grants are by no means a slam dunk. You know, a lot of challenges from the local level. You know, there's a lot of different programs where this money goes to, over 200 federal grant programs. For example, expanding broadband access, there's about 25 different federal programs that are working on that issue. So trying to figure out where the grants are, which ones are worth your time to apply for. It's more of an art than a science. It's a really highly competitive, complex process for a lot of these different grants. I believe our shipping terminal folks are working on a RAISE grant right now that, I mean, these things, can go over 100 pages and take months of work to go through. So you really want to make sure you're going for the right grant. Some of the other ones are really simple and easy, and you just want to make sure you're fulfilling all what the federal requirements are looking at, whether it's sustainability or diversity and equity, or, you've got to have the right criteria field to qualify for those. When you do get the grants, they require extensive documentation, detailed project plans, budgets, evaluation strategies. And then after you get them, a large amount of what Tamara's team does is grant compliance. So there's a lot of, you really have to decide if it's worth it or not. For example, brownfields, EPA brownfields grants, a lot of people ask us, why don't we get more of those? But our experience has been a lot of times, I think before the bipartisan infrastructure law, they were averaged about 60 million per year was available nationwide. So for 500,000 or $1 million, you sign yourself up for these really onerous reporting requirements where it requires a lot of staff time and such. And so, for comparison, in last session at the state level, we got about 27 million in cleanup grants. So having that consultant guidance for which grants to apply for and having support as we go through is an important factor. Another reason, congressionally directed spending, this is the return of earmarks. This was what went away after the Bridge to Nowhere in Alaska when Ted Stevens was directing, a couple $100 million to a bridge in Ketchikan. But those have come back recently. There was $15.3 billion awarded to 7,200 projects last year. Typical range of these projects is about 500,000 to 3 million. The consulting firm that we've identified has successfully secured $86 million for 52 projects. So a really big opportunity that we see. Another something to mention is for agency-funded federal projects. This is the last example, or an example that I have of how complex these get was the Squalicum Waterway Maintenance Dredging Project. This happened in 2019. It was a $2.2 million project done by the Army Corps of Engineers. And the Squalicum Waterway is really important for Bellingham Cold Storage and all the waterfront industries. It supports about 2,000 jobs. In the last time it was dredged was 2004. In the old days, you would just call up the Army Corps and say, yeah, we need a dredge, and they would schedule you for maintenance. They're kind of the federal highways of the roads. But just to give you a flavor of the complexity, now they require cargo volumes. Well, the cargo volumes for the Squalicum Waterway, they don't count fish as part of that cargo volume. So they immediately say, well, you don't ship anything out of that federal channel. So you're low on the list for federal funding, so you got to work through that. Then you have to secure, it's not just money to go dredge it, you have to get money to do the bathymetry, you have to do the sediment characterization. So in 2017, and that's not a cheap effort, we got $436,000 to go through and characterize all the sediments, and this is every time you do a maintenance dredge. And then they go through, and through the dredge material management program for open water disposal, you have to do a suitability determination through that multi-agency effort. The Army Corps at the time has a federal standard which says they have to use the lowest cost option for disposal. Because that lowest cost option for disposal wasn't a viable site, it was the Bellingham Bay Pisgah site, which we had agreed to use because of the Lummi tribe. The Corps estimated the disposal costs at over $10 million, which basically was going to trip us into a category where they weren't going to give us funding because it was, for the amount of volume and the high cost, it just wasn't going to work. So we had to really work through that and let them know there was other Pisgah sites and so we ended up using Port Gardner and Rosario, but they required us to pay the incremental cost to go past the Bellingham Bay site to, even though it was, no one was going to use that site, they required us to do a cost share agreement and pay for that incremental cost. Then they had to go to Congress and get a capability number. We worked through the state, Senator Erickson, rest in peace, who's helped us get $750,000, and we had to get a contributed funds agreement with the Army Corps. And then finally, we were able to work with the Corps to get that in their work plan appropriation. And then that whole project had to go through the environmental reviews, the endangered species, U.S. fish, NIMS, the Clean Water Act, NEPA, tribal treaty rights, et cetera. So having a little horsepower to help through that process and guide when important projects like dredging the Squalicum Waterway is really valuable. Less important, I'd say the most important reason we're recommending a federal consulting services for the money. We're going after the money, but there are a number of policies and regulations that are really important, for permitting and add costs to our projects. The ESA 7, Section 7 for maintenance projects, an issue that's come up. It's delayed work at our cruise terminal and affected added costs, other maintenance projects, staffing levels through the permitting agencies, mitigation banking, something that could really help us. The Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to provide funding for those core projects, the Water Resources Development Act, the TSA law enforcement officer reinforcement out at the airport, passenger facility charge, FAA regulations. All these are important issues that obviously the Port of Bellingham is not going to change, but working to tell our story and bring those stories to Congress so that we have a good path forward on our projects. As far as CFM advocates, they have really good experience with Washington ports. They work with airports. They have a 100% client success rate getting funding. It's about a 62-to-1 client return on investment. They've secured 6 RAISE grants in a row. Currently, we're working on a RAISE grant for rail at the shipping terminal, so a really important project for us. So we want to not leave any stone unturned to try to get funding for that. And as I mentioned before, grant support. So these are some of the reasons that we budgeted for a federal consultant and think with the amount of federal funding and the priority projects that we have, it would be a good time to bring them on. We also see them as coming to report to the commission once per year to tell you what's going on and what the lay of the land is at DC and make sure that they're advocating for our port priorities as intended. And it's a year-by-year contract, so if we're not seeing the return on our investment that we want, we can, look for a different model. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Briscoe? Hello. Wake up.
There we go.
There
It's
we go.
going. I'm trying to get unhinged there. No, it was very informative. I understand exactly why we probably should have one. So, no questions for you, Mike. Well done.
Mr. Shepard?
Yeah, I really do think there's kind of an unprecedented amount of investment from the federal government coming in for both manufacturing and infrastructure right now, and just really American manufacturing. And so that's what we do here, and I want to make sure we're taking advantage of as much of that federal funds that are coming through, because they're available now. We don't know how many of these bills will get re-upped into the future. So I think it's kind of one of those strike while the iron's hot opportunities. And I think we do get value out of having this type of arrangement in Olympia. We have a local lobbyist which helps walk us through some of these opportunities. And I know when we were in Washington, D.C. a year or two ago, there were some moments where I felt like maybe if we had somebody on the ground, we would have connected a couple more dots. And we were there asking FAA for funding for that international arrivals terminal and some of the projects that we're still trying to get behind and connect the dots on the funding. And I would hope that somebody in this position could help us get there. I do like that there's the year by year, and I would hope that we would kind of have an assessment by staff in another year or two to really figure out if this is a wise investment, something we want to continue.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm glad you brought up the International Rivals Terminal. It's definitely on our radar. This is one that I do lose sleep for. We did apply for the International Rivals Terminal. Our past aviation director was very bullish. He wanted, a large amount of money to pay for the whole thing. In retrospect, I wish our ask had been a little bit smaller. It would have fit within the non-hub category of airport we're in, consistent with the other grants. So I think we swung a little bit too hard for that one with our funding requests. There's still opportunities moving forward, and I know Kip and his team are working on it. And that's where I see really great value for this is making sure our requests are matching what the available funding and what those available funding levels are. And so having that kind of broader experience, I think will support some of these grant requests.
You got to go to DC too.
Yeah, true. You get to go next time.
Copenhagen, maybe on my list too. Yeah, my question is more, we went through those first round of all the stuff that we've gotten federal money for, and we did that without a consultant in DC, right?
Yep.
So I just need to know what they add to the mix. I know lobbyists, and I know that we're going to add, $7-8 grand a month to a bill. What value are we getting for that? How much workload are they going to take off of us? What's the value add for bringing somebody on at almost 100 grand a year? And if they are going to increase our workload here, are we going to need to bring somebody else on here because they're bringing opportunities to us, or are they going to take that load off of us? So that's the question for me.
That's a good question,
What's the
Commissioner.
value add?
Yeah, it's a good question. We will not increase our staffing because we hire a federal lobbyist. I don't see that association at all. What we're getting, we could increase our staff and not hire a federal lobbyist, but then we're going to hire one individual for about the same cost as the lobbyist, where we get 10 experts, and they all have different areas. It's kind of like hiring CSD, where you've got an environmental lawyer, you've got a transactional lawyer, you've got a litigation lawyer. CFM is very much like that.
And it's a large.
It's a very large firm. Yeah, I don't know how many people are in it, but they've got.
And what's going to make them focus on us?
Well, they have a lot of clients. So Mike and I are going to stay on them, and we're going to have lots of calls with them. So they will be focused on us. I anticipate that they will bring in, $5 to $10 million worth of grants that we otherwise would not have gotten. And so that's a pretty good return on that investment. And then, as important, in my opinion, is these things that aren't grants, but that we struggle with, the NIPS and the Corps of Engineers, the mitigation calculator. There's already a lot of people working on this mitigation calculator, but having another lobby firm talking to our delegation about these things is going to help, because they're meeting with them far more than we are. They're meeting with them on different topics. They're seeing them at the bars at night. They're going to lunch with them. They're in DC, and they have a presence there, and they can say, yeah, that Port of Bellingham had to pay $2 million worth of mitigation for a $2 million project. That just doesn't make sense. And the more that's repeated to the delegation, the more it'll set in. So I anticipate a good return on this. It will not increase our staff costs at all, and I think it will get good results on both the grants and the other federal obstacles that we run into.
And what other ports in Washington State are they representing?
All you have to do is look at who's recently got a lot of grants, and they are represented. And you look at who hasn't gotten grants, and they are not represented. So Grays Harbor has representation. Longview has representation. Kalama has, different firms. Vancouver has representation. Everett has representation. So all the ports our size or slightly bigger than us have federal representation on the ground in DC.
And so how do we get to the top of their list, so when they're going out to have dinner with these guys, and that comes up, that the Port of Bellingham is the first off their lips?
It's like
not
anything.
the Port of Grays Harbor, for
Correct.
example.
Well, and who does CFM represent? One other port? Was it
Port of Longview, and they just got a $16 million raise grant last year for the for their industrial rail corridor. I would say they're on a yearly contract, and they're going to come here and report to you what they're advocating for, what they're hearing, and so I think that's going to keep them honest. They're not going to be here, telling about their.
Yeah, when they go to dinner, I want them to say Port of Bellingham before they say the Port of Longview.
Sure.
Right. I want to be front and center in their mind if we're going to be engaging them.
Yes.
And I just know how lobbyists work. they get a bunch of clients.
It's the squeaky wheel as in anything else.
Exactly right.
And we did interview the Port of Vancouver's lobbyist. We interviewed Grace Harbor's lobbyist. We like CFM the best for a number of reasons. I think they're a good fit for Bellingham.
All right, great discussion. Thank you. Carrie?
I will have one more question. Is it possible to have 6-month reports instead of a year? A year's a long time.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, certainly. I mean, and that's a year that they would show up here in person. That doesn't mean they can't zoom in from DC and do a quick report on some things as well. So we'll make sure you hear from them more than once a year.
Okay, thank you.
And just a side note, just when you ran through that thing, it just brought to mind how incredible this staff has been without that. I mean, to you, well, who's ever left, Port of Bellingham, Rob, an incredible job over the years. And I see that this will only add to that, but it doesn't go without notice that, man, we have been incredible at what we do.
It takes a village. I mean, these grants are a nightmare for accounting, but they plow through them and they get the paperwork done on them so we can go get more. And then,
And look at all the work we're doing.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, kudos to the staff.
All right. Authorize the executive director to execute a PSA with CFM Advocates to provide federal lobbying consultant services.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard? Yep. Commissioner Bell is also a yes. All right, that's the end of our meeting. We now have a moment for public comment before we go to other business. So just in case you influence one of us, is there anybody online that would wish to speak to the commission or anybody in the room that's not an Import employee? Seeing no one, hearing no one, we'll go to other business. Commissioner Shepard?
Sure. A couple things. On this Thursday, there's both a online and in-person opportunity to hear from members of our Working Waterfront who are engaged in also creating a sustainable environment here. This is a panel presentation that is being sponsored by Western Washington University and Huxley College. And we've got a couple folks that we all know, Dan Tucker, Pete Granger, Lindsay Thomas, are all going to be on that panel. It's at 4:30 on this Thursday. So I encourage folks to get that on their calendar and find a way to attend. I think it's going to be a great presentation. And I appreciate them taking time to really help us tell our positive message about connections between a working waterfront and a sustainable environment. I want to mention last week we were in, Rob and Mike and I were in Olympia. Mike did a great job setting up a lot of our meetings and opportunities to connect with our delegation. While we were down there, we spent a lot of time advocating for MOTCA funding, like we usually do. We get a huge return on MOTCA dollars locally, and it's really important that we make sure our legislature knows they need to resist swiping those funds, whether they're capital funds or operational funds. We need those where they were expected to be and for the purposes they were designed. We also spent some time lobbying for a commercial cleanout on the Bellingham Shipping Terminal so that ships have a location that they can safely dispose of liquid waste, since you can't, thankfully, do that in the Salish Sea anymore. And we're looking to provide that opportunity for an increase in shipping traffic that we keep seeing at our terminal. So those were a couple things that we were advocating for, and it's just as important to be advocating for real projects as it is to maintain those relationships that we have with those individuals. So those are my two updates. I did want to circle back to Paula's comment in the beginning about the pier in Blaine. Do we have any update? We perennially talk about this, and we continue to hear we're waiting on the city of Blaine. I'm tired of waiting on the city of Blaine. What do we have to do? What's next?
We are the next commission meeting, we're going to give you a very brief Blaine update, but then we're going to set up a date for a work study in the second half of March where we go to Blaine and we can walk the site and we can meet up there. We want to have the regular meeting here because it's really hard logistically to get everything up there for a regular meeting. But if we do a work study, if the commission so desires, we can go up there, walk around and see the condition of the pier, see what, and talk about what needs to be done. We haven't had a response from the city on the road. We haven't also reached out to them, so we will do that before that meeting and just get them, maybe someone from the city can show up at that meeting and give you an update from their perspective.
And that kind of fits into where I was going with our discussions as a commission. Before we get to the next budget cycle, I'd like to be able to go through all of the areas of the port, see where we're spending money, see what we have on the books, see what's planned, and then make some value judgments based on what we've got, because every time we hear a complaint from somebody, we tend to react and want to fix it. And quite frankly, we've got a lot of big things on our plate, and that may or may not rise to the top when we get there. But it's real easy to appease somebody and say, yeah, we're going to go look at that and we're going to go do that. But by the time we're done with this whole process, it's my hope and expectation that we'll know where the waterfront's going, where the shipping terminal's going, where Blaine's going, where the marinas are going, and what we have in the works and how much that's going to cost. My biggest fear, as you heard earlier, and Bobby lay off me on this one, is that our expenses are going up. That's not going to stop. And as we increase our expenses, at some point, we're going to have to make some tough choices. And so the hope is that we can go through and do a work study in Blaine, do a work study on the waterfront, do a work study, around the port, just to see what we have in place, what can't be moved, what needs to go forward, and make those value judgments when we get to the budget cycle. So it's not just a list of areas and line items, that we've got a real history of the entire perspective of the port, and then maybe move some of those things into a position where they can be funded or not. That's my expectation.
Yeah, no, I support that process. I think it's good for us to do, and I certainly support that level of engagement with the capital expenses.
Well, and we all have values that we're going to bring to the table because we're elected, and so we bring our communities to the table, and we can discuss that from our perspective, right, and give some direction to the port staff from that level.
Obviously subject to commission direction, but the current plan for the Jorgensen Pier has been emergency access only or disabled access only for vehicles out to, and the rest was passenger or foot traffic out to the pier.
Yeah, we've discussed that before. The other options are significantly more expensive. And
Correct.
We are working under budget constraints. Paula's not wrong when she says there is significant interest in the community. It is the number one thing I hear from people when I talk to them, go to their doors or go to events, and from folks in Blaine. And it's one that has just been on our minds for quite some time, and it's hard waiting for other partners to do things. If it was all a port initiative, we probably would have had this done by now.
Well, they're also
a little history on that Jorgensen Pier.
I knew that was coming.
Just for Paula, there was always been a business on that pier up until Washington Crab Producers, whose main office is in Westport, Washington, quit using it as a buying station. Whitey Steiner was the guy that bought there, a local resident in Blaine, and he was there for, you might as well call it forever. Their buying station was exactly where the oyster operation is now. So, a business out there has always been there, and I probably expect something to be on that corner right there. It's interesting, and, it's jobs. And when Washington Crab Producers had that buying station there in that corner, they had semis backed out on that dock, loading crab, loading salmon. It was a busy place. October was a phenomenal amount of business off that little corner on the dock. So there's always been a business on that dock, as far as I can remember back, which is a ways.
And I know we're competing with funds for all the other stuff that's going on out in Blaine. I mean, we've got cleanups, we've got, buildings to rebuild, we've got docks to repair, we've got ramps to build. I mean, that kind of thing so, putting it all in that context, I think will help us. But yeah, thanks. Thanks, Bobby. Anything else?
No, not on this. I don't have anything.
Are you done with your other business?
Oh, yeah.
Bobby, you have any other business?
I do. Last meeting, I kind of slipped a little bit. Our staff, we had quite a weather event there, pretty cold, some of the coldest temperatures we've seen for a long time. We had some complaining about our airport, and even I asked questions, and I shouldn't have been doing that. I should have been complimenting our airport staff and our airport managers, keeping that airport open. They did a hell of a job. And the airlines are the ones that should have been getting the flack for what went on there. It wasn't our airport. Our airport operated smoothly and efficiently. They were outstanding, and they put a lot of hours in that they probably didn't have to, but they did. We've got a executive director that goes above and beyond the means at all times. I don't know how he keeps everything in his head he does. I don't know how he operates a whole life and runs the Port of Bellingham. I know I couldn't do it. He does the job of two people, basically. And hopefully we've got someone coming on staff to help relieve some of that pressure, Rob. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you,
To the
Commissioner.
rest of our staff, everyone at the Port of Bellingham, you heard the reports tonight. You heard everything tonight. And it's all because of you people. Everybody from the top on down has done 110% at all times. The plates are full. Most of them got sideboards on them. People go home at night and probably don't sleep very well trying to figure out how they're going to get it all done tomorrow. And I think you just need to know that this commissioner, and I'm sure my other fellow commissioners, we're very grateful for the job you do. And we're very privileged to give direction to the staff of Port of Bellingham to get the job done they do. It's not us three guys. We look things over and we help and we try to give direction. But the people, the staff at the Port of Bellingham are the people that get the job done for the people of Whatcom County. So thank you very much to everyone for what you guys do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Those are very kind words. If I can just throw a quick example in there, because our maintenance department also responded incredibly well during the weather events, both the freeze before the snow and the snow itself. My neighbor drove to the airport during the middle of the snowstorm, and when he called me to say he got to the airport, he's like, how do you get the city to plow all the roads near the airport? Because they're the only roads in town that are plowed. And I was like, well, that wasn't the city. That was port staff that plowed those roads. So thank you very much. Our maintenance staff did an incredible job. They got very little sleep during that period of time. They responded to numerous emergencies, pipes bursting, et cetera. And they just did a phenomenal job staying on top of it all and getting businesses back to reopen. So I appreciate the kind words. We got a great team here.
Absolutely, we do. And that's all I have.
Okay, and I have nothing further business, so meeting adjourned.